I'm Mara Jennings, 34 co-founder of Jennings & Sons Handcrafted Woodworks. The air in the hotel ballroom smelled faintly of lemon wax and vanilla-glazed desserts. Everything gleamed white linen tablecloths, polished silver trays of hors d'oeuvres, and the chrome-etched sign near the entrance that read, Jennings & Sons, 50th Anniversary Gala, honoring our legacy. I stood in a slate-gray jumpsuit, clutching the small clutch I had rehearsed putting down 100 times. My name wasn't on the invitation, but my blood was in every nail of the business. The host greeted guests in a crisp black tuxedo, handing out gold-trimmed programs with names embossed in raised lettering. I leaned forward to take one. "Ma'am, these are for registered guests only," the woman at the registration table said without looking up. "I'm registered," I said quietly. "I'm family." She blinked once, and that was all. "There's no Mara listed. Maybe you're looking for the open reception down the hall." "No, I'm a Jennings. I helped start the company. I worked in that sawdust-stained garage before the showroom even had heat." My voice cracked, not out of drama, but from the sheer absurdity of saying those words in front of two strangers holding clipboards. Then I saw it. The program she'd just given to someone else. I squinted to read the cover. There it was. The new logo, Jennings & Sons. A stylized silhouette of 3 figures standing over a workbench. But not 4. They'd taken my silhouette out. If you've ever stood in front of something you helped build and watched them pretend you were never there, drop a comment or tell me where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if family drama ever erased you from your own life too. I stepped back. My fingers clenched so tightly around my purse that the zipper left an imprint on my palm. Laughter echoed from inside the ballroom. A familiar voice. Uncle Ray. Couldn't have done it without my boys. The crowd cheered. I knew the lineup. My father, his 2 sons from his second marriage, neither of whom could operate a table saw without help, and my uncle, beaming like he'd raised them all from oak and glue himself. I turned, ready to leave, when a deep voice behind me said, "Excuse me, are you Mara Jennings?" I froze. Yes. A tall man in a navy suit stepped forward. His name tag read H. Dillon, Trademark Attorney, Commonwealth Registry. He held a folder in one hand and what looked like a rolled certificate in the other. "I've been trying to reach you for months. I was the examiner on your federal trademark registration. It's been approved. The ownership of Jennings & Sons is officially under your name. You filed before they did." The woman behind the desk looked up sharply. Her mouth parted slightly. He smiled at me. "Would you like me to announce that the doors to the ballroom had just opened again?" A wave of music drifting into the hallway. I nodded once. Mr. Dillon turned, handed his folder to the woman at the desk, and stepped into the ballroom as if he belonged there. "Ladies and gentlemen," I heard him say, "before you begin tonight's toast, I'd like to present the registered trademark owner of Jennings & Sons, Ms. Mara Jennings." The room stilled. Chairs scraped. Forks paused. Someone gasped. I stood in the hallway, motionless, feeling the air change. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was something quieter, the shift between being invisible and being undeniable. And they couldn't take that part out of the logo. The silence didn't last long. It never does at these kinds of events where champagne is poured too quickly and tension lies just beneath the surface like a sheet of thin ice. I walked into the ballroom, each step sounding too loud on the marble floor, like someone had turned up the volume on my heels. Eyes turned, faces I'd known my whole life, some shocked, some blank, some smug, watched me cross the space like I was intruding. I wasn't invited. But I wasn't trespassing either. I was claiming what was mine. At the front, Uncle Ray stood with a flute of Prosecco in one hand and a paper speech in the other, the corners trembling slightly. My father, George Jennings, looked straight at me with that same unreadable expression he used to give me as a child when I asked why he never framed any of my drawings in the shop like he did for the boys. "Mara," he said. "Just my name. No warmth, no surprise, just acknowledgement, as though I were a customer who showed up after hours." "Dad," I said, my voice steady. Mr. Dillon smiled at the microphone like this was any ordinary announcement, not a legal bomb dropped in the middle of a family gala. "As of this afternoon," he said, unfolding a crisp certificate, "the name, logo, and commercial use rights of Jennings and Sons fall under the registered trademark of Ms. Mara Jennings, filed 6 months prior to any other competing claim. As per federal registry law, she holds exclusive rights to its branding across all public and commercial uses." He handed me the certificate in front of everyone. The room stayed quiet, but the shift was unmistakable. People moved back just slightly, the way one does around power. I saw the designer who made the logo whisper something to the head of marketing. One of the waiters blinked at me with surprise and mouthed, "Wow." But I didn't come for drama. I didn't come to ruin their night. I came to be seen. The story didn't start here. Of course, it started when I was 6, sanding the edges of pine wood under Dad's watchful eye. He was always gentler back then, before the business got big, before he started saying things like image and reputation. My hands would get splinters, and he'd pull them out with the tip of a pocket knife, humming Patsy Cline under his breath. That was our ritual. By the time I was 12, I could stain wood without streaks. At 14, I was sketching designs for the front-facing showroom cabinets. By 16, I had a full apprenticeship title and a work badge with my name on it. But when I was 23, I made the mistake of falling in love with a woman. It was like someone had flipped a switch in my family. Mom didn't say much, but she stopped calling. Uncle Ray told me it was a confusing phase, and Dad looked at me the way he looked at warped wood with disappointment and a plan to sand it down. "We can't have customers thinking things," he said once, when I asked why I wasn't featured on the company's new website bio. "It's a family brand." "I'm family," I'd said. He didn't answer. That's when the unraveling began. Subtle at first. My name left off printed brochures, my signature removed from collaborative designs, and then, finally, the new logo last year. 3 figures. All male. I left the business quietly, not with a slammed door, but a nod to the workshop crew and a silent goodbye to the dust-filled room where I'd poured half my life. I thought I'd just disappear. Let them have their illusion. But one night, while flipping through an old folder of sketches I'd drawn for our first catalog, each labeled M, Jennings, something in me clicked. I opened my laptop, typed USPTO trademark search, and saw it. Jennings and Sons wasn't registered by anyone yet. So I filed. Not out of vengeance, out of memory. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name back. Back in the ballroom. Uncle Ray cleared his throat. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Mara hasn't been involved in operations for years." I stepped forward, still holding the certificate. "I built the original furniture line that launched your first showroom. I designed the flagship pieces that got you your first 2 awards. And I helped write the brand's voice before you decided I wasn't the right kind of family." A few heads turned. I saw Karen from accounting lower her glass and look at the floor. I turned to the crowd. Not my father, not my uncle, just the people. My name was taken off the logo, the paperwork, and the story. But not off the reality. This, I held up the certificate. This isn't to embarrass anyone. This is to restore the truth. Dad stepped forward then. His voice was lower than I expected. "You didn't have to come here tonight. I know. You could have called. I tried. You never answered." He said nothing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking in silence. If you've ever built something with your own hands only to watch someone else put their name on it, drop a comment, or just sit with me for a second, I know how it burns. I know how it bruises. But I also know how it heals when you take it back. The music hadn't started again. The speeches were forgotten. The family stood frozen in an expensive room filled with flowers, lights, and the ghost of the version of me they tried to erase. And then, something I didn't expect happened. My youngest cousin, Ava, only 19, wearing a silk blue dress and eyeliner too thick, walked over and took my hand. "I didn't know," she whispered. "They never said anything. You were always my favorite." That was when the night shifted. Not with applause, but with truth. And that was more than enough. I didn't stay long at the gala after that. Just long enough to hand the certificate to a startled intern from legal who had no idea what to do with it. Long enough to see my father walk toward the exit with my stepbrothers flanking him like an old king with unworthy heirs. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. For once, I wasn't chasing anything. Outside, the night had softened. The valet offered me a polite nod, unaware of the strange battlefield I'd just walked through. I slipped into my car, shut the door, and sat in the silence. Not triumphant, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after the wind finally stops trying to knock you over. That night, I went home to my little shop. Yes, I had my own now. I called it Dovetail. Quiet name, clean logo, just a single outline of a finished joint, 2 pieces of wood interlocking, neither dominating the other. Balance, precision. And behind that logo was me, only me, my hands, my hours, my stubborn refusal to vanish. I started Dovetail 2 years ago, in the old barn behind a rented house on the edge of town. No investors, no family loans, just me, a used lathe, a secondhand belt sander, and a list of local suppliers who remembered what I used to make before I disappeared from the Jennings story. I took commissions from couples, small shops, women starting bakeries, widowers wanting something carved from their wife's favorite tree. No prestige, no glossy magazine covers, just real things, built for real hands. It wasn't easy. My fingers bled again like they did when I was 6. Only this time there was no dad humming Patsy Cline and fishing out the splinters. There were weeks when I lived off boiled lentils and didn't know if I could make rent. But every time I felt myself slipping into the quiet despair of not enough, I'd walk into the barn, pick up a slab of walnut or ash, and let the grain remind me there's beauty in what's buried. You just have to sand until it shows. Then came the article. I almost missed it. A customer forwarded it to me. "Hey, isn't this your old company?" It was a puff piece in a local business magazine titled "Legacy Brands in Crisis: The Trouble at Jennings & Sons." A reporter had picked up on the sudden trademark transfer, the halted advertising campaign, the retracted logo rollout. The article was polite, but the subtext was clear. Something had happened, and they didn't want to talk about it. No one quoted my name, but one sentence made me laugh out loud. Sources say an earlier family member filed first and now holds exclusive brand names, but internal efforts are being made to correct the situation amicably. Correct, as if it were a clerical error. They didn't want a conversation. They wanted control. But here's the thing about control, it doesn't last when it's built on denial. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their meeting. I had the name, the papers, the design, and most importantly, I had myself. But part of me still wanted the truth to be known not for revenge, but for visibility. There's a difference. So I posted, not a rant, not a tell-all, just a photo of me in my shop, holding a piece of mahogany I'd been shaping for days. Behind me, the original sketch of the Jennings logo from 15 years ago, 4 silhouettes, drawn by hand. Mine, the only one holding a hammer. Caption: some things we build quietly, some things we have to claim out loud. It wasn't viral, but it traveled. A woman from a non-profit woodworking school messaged me, asking if I'd come to the workshop. A retired carpenter in Idaho mailed me a letter, an actual letter telling me he'd been pushed out of his family business too. And little by little, my inbox filled with stories. Mothers left out of farm logos, daughters whose names were erased from restaurant menus, sisters cut from real estate agencies, their faces replaced by smiling sons. I wasn't the only one. You probably aren't either. If you're reading this, and you know what it's like to be quietly deleted, not with cruelty, but with silence, just know it's not the end. You can write your name back in. You can trademark your voice, not just with paper, but with action. The hardest part isn't filing the form. It's deciding you're worth the fight. Back at Dovetail, I kept going, one order at a time. My hands grew calloused again, and this time, I wore those marks like medals. A local boutique asked if they could stock my pieces. I said yes, under one condition: full name, front tag, Mara Jennings, Dovetail founder. I never asked my father why he cut me out. I imagine, deep down, he thought he was protecting something. The brand, the family image. Or maybe he just didn't want to explain me to his country club friends. Either way, I stopped needing that answer. People think revenge is loud, that it's a courtroom or a shouting match. But sometimes, it's quiet. It's a workshop lit by one flickering bulb. It's an invoice with your name on it. It's a teenage cousin pulling you aside and whispering, "I'm proud of you." Sometimes, revenge is just being seen. One morning, months after the gala, I got a letter in a thick cream envelope. No return address. The handwriting was sharp and efficient. Mara, you made your point. I hope it brings you peace. Dad, no love. No, I'm sorry. But still, something. A sign that he'd seen it. Seen me. I tucked the letter behind the certificate in my file drawer. Not because I needed it, because it was part of the story. Because being erased doesn't mean you stop existing. It just means you draw yourself back in this time. In ink. The first time someone called me ma'am in my own shop, I didn't know how to respond. It was a teenage boy, maybe 16, looking for a birthday gift for his grandmother. He wandered around, nervously tapping his fingers on the edge of a maple countertop I'd just finished oiling. "You make all this?" he asked. I nodded. Every piece. He nodded back, trying not to look impressed, but I saw it. That glint. That flicker of awe I used to chase in my father's eyes. "Cool," he said. "Can you engrave stuff, of course?" He pulled out a photo from his back pocket, a blurry image of an old rocking chair and a woman smiling beside it. "She passed," he murmured, avoiding my eyes. "But this was her chair. I want to get something like it. Same shape." I looked at the photo again and felt something stir. Not grief, not nostalgia, belonging. We spent 30 minutes sketching options. He left with a receipt and a promise that it'd be ready in 3 weeks. I watched him leave, that lightness in his step like something was lifted. That's when I realized what I built wasn't just a business. It was a place people brought their ghosts. It became a pattern. A widow who wanted her wedding bed frame repurposed into a garden bench. A woman who brought her son's childhood drawings and asked if I could carve one into a keepsake box. A man in his 70s who just wanted a small shelf, because I'm downsizing. But I want at least one thing in the house that feels like me. Each story stitched something back into me. The parts that had unraveled when I walked away from Jennings and Sons. The parts I'd convinced myself were no longer useful. But healing isn't linear. The week after my photo went semi-viral, my stepbrother Jordan showed up at the shop. I almost didn't recognize him. He was slimmer than I remembered, his hair longer. His usual smug expression softened into something almost human. "Hey," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "Hey." He looked around. "It smells like cedar." "It is cedar." He nodded. Slowly. "This is nice. Thanks." A long silence stretched between us, the kind that only grows between people who share DNA and nothing else. "I wanted to say something," he said finally. "We didn't know about the trademark thing. Not until it was too late." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know. Or didn't think it mattered." He flinched. "Fair." I leaned against the workbench. "Why are you here?" "Jordan." He glanced down, then met my eyes. "Because even if Dad never says it, I think you deserve to be part of it. You were part of it. And I don't want us to keep pretending like you weren't." I studied him. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't whole, either. Not ready to burn the bridge that connected him to the old world. "Are you here to make peace?" I asked. "Or to keep the peace with yourself?" He swallowed hard. "Does it matter I didn't answer?" He walked over to a stool, sat, and watched me sand the edge of a frame. "You know," he said after a while, "Dad's trying to rebrand. Wants to go by Jennings Fine Interiors. Start fresh." I smirked, running from the name, running from the loss. He looked around the shop again. "He misses you," he said. He won't say it, but he does. "He misses control." I replied. "Not me." Jordan stood. "Maybe. But that doesn't mean he's not hurting. Neither does it mean he gets a pass." He nodded once and walked to the door. Before he left, he paused. "If you ever wanted to talk to us, I'd listen." I didn't respond right away. "Thanks," I said eventually. But I didn't call, because reconciliation isn't always a phone call. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's building something new from the pieces they didn't think you'd keep. One day, I got an email from a woman named Clara. She ran an artisan collective in Vermont and wanted to feature Dovetail in their quarterly publication. She asked if I'd send photos, maybe a small write-up about why I started the shop. I wrote back 2 sentences, because I was erased, and I refused to vanish. She published it exactly as I'd sent it. Orders picked up. A local news station came by to film a short feature, then a podcast interview, then a panel invite. None of it glamorous, but all of it real. For the first time, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was simply visible. That winter, I carved a series of stools out of old church pews, salvaged from a chapel that had flooded 2 years before. The grain was stubborn, the layers resistant. But when I finished, each stool held something sacred. Redemption. Maybe. I donated them to a community shelter down the street. And one afternoon, while dropping off the last stool, a woman tapped me on the shoulder. "You're Mara, right?" From the furniture shop I turned. She was in her 60s, kind eyes, holding a small child's hand. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "My grandson uses one of your benches when he reads at the library. It's his favorite spot." I smiled. "That means more than you know." She looked at me, her gaze soft. "You're part of this town now." That hit harder than anything else had in months. Not founder, not owner, not craftswoman. Just part of something. Part of here. Later that night, I pulled out the old Jennings & Sons blueprint folder from the back of my cabinet. I hadn't touched it in over a year. Dust covered the spine. I opened it and flipped through the designs, my handwriting scrawled in pencil margins, notes from Dad written in red. One page stopped me cold. A sketch of a 4-person silhouette logo. Before they edited it. Before they rewrote history. I tore the page out gently and framed it. Not to hang, but to keep. Because not every war ends in victory. Some end in memory. Some in a quiet workshop where the lights stay on because you turn them on yourself. And when the next customer comes in, asking if I can engrave a name into a gift box, I'll say yes, because I know the weight of a name. I know what it means to carve it back into the world. Spring arrived quietly that year, sneaking into the corners of the workshop like light through aged window panes. I didn't notice it at first. I was too busy shaping table legs, sanding drawer joints, answering emails from a new stockist in Oregon. But then one morning, I stepped outside and realized the frost had lifted. The air didn't bite. It breathed. I opened all the windows in the shop that day, let the smell of cedar and cherry wood drift into the wind. I was finishing a custom cabinet when the email landed. Subject line: use of trademark in upcoming event materials. I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but the sender, Jennings Fine Interiors LLC, stopped me. I clicked. It was formal. Lawyer speak. Asking if I'd approve limited temporary use of the original Jennings & Sons name and logo for a private memorial event celebrating the business's origins. As a gesture of shared legacy, it read, "and acknowledgement of foundational contribution." At the bottom, a line: "George Jennings requests the opportunity to honor your role." I stared at the screen for a long time. Honor? I didn't reply. Not right away. I shut the laptop, walked to the back of the shop, and sat in the corner chair I'd built for myself out of walnut, oak, and thyme. Could it be real? Or just another trick to tidy the story before the press caught wind of anything messier? I let the question hang there until the next morning. Then I wrote back, "You may use the name for that event only. I will attend. I expect no edits to my title, no omission of my name, and no corrections made for the comfort of others. This is not forgiveness. This is history. Please treat it with care." They replied in minutes. "You will be given the floor." The memorial was held in the first showroom, now retired, preserved like a museum. The walls still bore the old wood planks I'd helped stain, back when I was too young to understand how permanence can be erased. But there they were, nail heads I'd driven in, hooks I'd screwed by hand, and a single cabinet in the far right corner, one of mine, with the original label still barely visible, M.J. I arrived just as the guests were filtering in old suppliers, longtime clients, the families of past employees. My father stood at the entrance, thinner now, hair mostly white, suit a little loose. He saw me, and this time, he didn't look away. "Hi, Mara," he said. "Hello, Dad." A pause. "You look like your mother." I looked at him carefully. "She wouldn't have let you take my name off the wall." He nodded. "No, she wouldn't have." We stood there for a beat. Then someone called him, and he stepped away. I found a seat near the side, out of the spotlight. I didn't need a stage. I needed presence. The event began with a slideshow. Photos of the early days Dad and Uncle Ray sawing timber, the first storefront opening, the ribbon-cutting ceremony where I stood off to the side, cropped out in most of the pictures. And then it happened. A slide appeared. Me, 16, in overalls, crouched by a finished bench with a chisel in my hand, grinning through the sawdust. The caption read, "Mara Jennings, co-founder, designer, craftsman, daughter." The crowd murmured. Someone near me whispered, "That's her." When they handed me the mic, I stood slowly. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. "I'm Mara Jennings," I said, voice steady. "And I was here from the beginning." I let that sit. I was here before the logo, before the showroom, before the press and the catalogs and the interviews. I was here when it was just two hands and a dream, and a freezing garage with no insulation. A few people chuckled softly. I wasn't just a helper. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a builder, a maker, a part of the name. More silence. And then, something rare, a slow, sincere round of applause. I left the mic without another word. After the event, a man approached me. Mr. Delaney, an old client I hadn't seen since I was 19. "You made the rocking chair for my wife," he said, tears in his eyes. "She sat in it every morning until the cancer got too loud." I touched his arm. "I remember. She wanted it stained to match her garden gate." He smiled. "She called it her thinking throne. She said it held her together." I nodded. "That's what wood does. Holds us when we can't hold ourselves." The night wore on. Wine glasses clinked, business cards exchanged, memories aired like old linens finally unboxed. I saw Jordan again. This time, he wasn't guarded. "You came," he said. "I did. Thank you for giving us a chance to fix it." I shook my head. "You didn't fix it. You told the truth. There's a difference." He didn't argue. I turned to go. But just as I reached the door, my father's voice caught me. "Mara." I turned. He walked over slowly, his hand slightly shaking as he reached into his coat pocket. "I found this," he said, handing me a worn envelope. "Your mother kept it in her desk." I opened it. Inside was a photo I'd never seen. Me, age 12, holding a mallet beside Dad, both of us beaming. A table between us halfway finished. On the back, in Mom's handwriting, Mara's first masterpiece. "She's going to be the one who changes everything." I couldn't speak. Dad stepped back, his eyes rimmed red. "I wish I'd listened to her more," he whispered. I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had finally run out of excuses. "I don't need your regret," I said gently. "I just needed my name." He nodded, and for once, didn't try to have the last word. I walked into the parking lot, the photo clutched in my hand, heart full. Not of peace, not yet, but of placement. The stars above blinked against the dark sky like scattered nails, waiting to be hammered into something whole. Back in my shop that week, I made a sign. It was for myself, no one else. Walnut slab, hand-chiseled letters, Mara Jennings, Dovetail founder, former co-founder, Jennings and Sons, trademark holder, woodworker, survivor, still here. I didn't hang it in the window. I hung it behind the workbench, right where I could see it every time I picked up a tool. Because sometimes you build a legacy not from inheritance, but from what they tried to take. Summer brought a different rhythm to the shop, one that smelled like citrus oil and warm pine. The air turned sticky. The wood dried faster. Customers came with sunlight on their shoulders, asking for outdoor benches, picnic tables, backyard trellises, all for weddings and reunions and anniversaries. I liked that. I liked making things that would sit at the center of memories, without needing to be remembered themselves. One afternoon, as I was loading a finished oak bench into a client's truck, I noticed a car idling just past the gravel drive. Black, sleek, clean. It didn't belong. The window rolled down, and I almost laughed when I saw who it was. Ray. Uncle Ray. He hadn't aged well. The charisma that once filled a room now clung to him like a borrowed suit one size too big. He gave me a little wave. Sheepish. I nodded. Nothing more. He parked and walked over, each step slower than I remembered. "You've got quite the setup here," he said, eyes scanning the yard. "Didn't need much." I replied, "Just honesty and good wood." He let that sit. He always had a talent for avoiding the obvious. "I saw the feature in Heritage Makers Monthly," he said. "Nice spread. That cherrywood cradle was beautiful." I leaned against the tailgate. You drove all the way out here to compliment a cradle." He winced. "No, I came to apologize." I raised my eyebrows. "I was wrong." He said, "We were wrong. What we did to you, it wasn't just bad business. It was betrayal." The word felt heavy, heavier than I expected. Betrayal. Not mistake. Not oversight. Betrayal. I looked at him, and for a moment, I remembered being 12 again, curled up on a stool while he made up bedtime stories using the names of different tools. Back then, I thought he'd never hurt me. "You knew what they were doing," I said quietly. "You knew they were phasing me out." He nodded. "I did. And you let it happen." His voice cracked. "I thought if I stayed close, I could protect what little of you was still there. But I was wrong. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting them from you." That landed. He took a breath. "I miss you, kid. Not just in the business, in the family." There it was again. Family. That word that had been stretched and snapped and patched over so many times. I wasn't sure what it meant anymore. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But part of me also remembered the silence. The way he never once called. Not during the fallout. Not when the papers were filed. Not when the logo changed. "Ray," I said, "you miss the memory of me. But the real me? The one who came out. The one who didn't want to just help, but lead you erased her." He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box. I recognized the hinges instantly brass. Inset. Custom. I'd made them 10 years ago for a series of presentation cases. My name was stamped on the underside in black ink. MJ. He opened it slowly and handed me what was inside. A compass. Brass. Antique. Worn at the edges but still functional. It was the one my grandfather used when he first started laying out floorboards by hand in the 1940s. "I thought your father had this," I said. "He did," Ray murmured. "But when he cleared his office, he gave it to me. I think he knew." "Knew what? That this was always supposed to be yours?" I stared at the compass. It was cool in my hand, heavier than it looked. The needle still pointed north. "I can't fix what we did," Ray said. "But I can tell you the truth. You were the best thing that ever happened to the company. You made it more than just a name." Silence stretched between us, not cold this time, but uncertain. I didn't forgive him. Not then, not fully, but I didn't ask him to leave either. He sat with me on the tailgate. We talked about wood types and hand tools and old machinery for nearly an hour, like two people pretending they were meeting for the first time, trying not to look too long at what they'd broken. As he left, he looked back once. "You still have time, you know, to write the story your way?" I didn't answer, just held the compass a little tighter. That night, I put the box on a shelf above my workbench. Not as a trophy, not as a symbol of victory, but as proof that I came from something older than betrayal, something rooted. That weekend, Ava came by. She wore paint-stained jeans and a ponytail and had a sketchbook under her arm. "I'm starting design school in the fall," she announced. "Design?" I asked. She nodded. "Interior and furniture. I want to learn curves and function and all the little details you taught me about when I was a kid." I blinked. "I didn't realize I'd taught you anything." "You did. Just by existing." That hit deep. She flipped open her sketchbook. There were drawings of benches, lampstands, bed frames, all scribbled in pencil, rough but full of promise. "I want to intern here," she said, grinning. "Not at Jennings Fine Interiors. I want to learn from you." Something in me softened. "Are you sure it won't be glamorous?" "I don't need glamorous. I need honest." So we started. Slowly. I showed her how to sand with the grain, how to glue edges without squeezing too hard, how to listen to the knock of good joinery. She was eager, hungry, awkward with the tools but unafraid. We laughed when she spilled finish on her shoe. We stayed up late sketching new ideas for adjustable book stands, and for the first time in years, I saw a version of legacy I could believe in, not passed down like a crown, but shared, like breath. One morning, Ava asked if I'd ever consider teaching more formally. Workshops, courses. I shrugged. Never thought about it. You should, she said. You're kind of incredible. That stuck with me. Maybe this was the next chapter, not reclaiming the past, but building something no one could take. A few days later, I ordered a new sign for the shop. Dovetail Studio and School. A small change, but it meant everything. People started signing up. Retired women, teenagers, hobbyists, mothers who wanted to build something for their daughters, and daughters who wanted to carve something with their mothers. We held the first official class on a Thursday. 10 people, 1 oak slab, and me. As I stood before them, explaining how to square an edge, I realized this was it. Not revenge, not restoration, but rebirth. If you've ever been erased, here's what I'll tell you. There's a life after the silence, a place where your hands become your language, where your presence becomes undeniable not through argument but through creation. And when you build from truth, there's no one who can trademark that. By fall, the shop no longer felt like a secret. Dovetail Studio and School was beginning to fill, not just with the sound of tools, but with the echoes of new voices, hopeful, hesitant, sometimes shaky, but full of something that had once been stripped from me, the right to belong. I had built this place from the scraps of a broken name, and now others were carving their initials into that space too. The first full-time student was a retired math teacher named Celeste, who confessed on her second day that she'd always wanted to be a furniture maker. She had a tremor in her hands, but a steady eye. She built a jewelry box in 3 weeks, each joint a little crooked but fiercely hers. Then came a mother and son duo, Vanessa and Theo. He was 10, shy, autistic, fixated on symmetry. She signed them both up after reading an article about us in the community paper. He liked sanding, said the sound helped him think straight. I let him keep the offcuts. He carried them home like treasure. Every Thursday evening, I watched these lives unfold around the same workbenches I once stood at alone, and for once, I didn't have to explain myself. I just had to show up. And I did. Again and again, until one morning, a letter came in the mail this time, not from a lawyer. The envelope was plain, no return address, but I knew the handwriting the moment I saw it. My father. I stood at the workbench, breathing carefully, as I opened it. Mara, I'm not good at this. Never was. I've always believed a man should show what he means, not say it. But lately, I've started to wonder if that belief was a way to avoid the things I needed to say but couldn't. You were always the best of us, the most patient, the most focused, the one who listened to the wood instead of rushing it. I see that now. I think I always saw it. But I didn't know how to honor it while also holding on to the picture of what I thought the family should be. And that's on me. I know I can't undo what I did. But if there's a time you'd allow it, I'd like to see the shop. Not as your father. Just as a man who once held a chisel and now wants to learn what his daughter built without him. If not, I understand. George. I didn't cry. I just read it again, then folded it slowly and slid it into the back of my ledger. Not because I forgave him, but because some words, once spoken, deserve a place to rest. A week passed. I didn't reply. Then another. And then, one afternoon, as I was teaching Ava how to dovetail 2 boards without visible pins. I looked up and saw him, standing just outside the window. No suit, no press release, just an old man in a denim jacket with sawdust on his boots. He didn't come in. He just waited. I wiped my hands and went out. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature but in certainty. Like life had weathered him more than time ever could. "I wasn't sure you'd come," I said. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome." I stepped aside. "You're not owed welcome, but the door's open." He nodded once and entered. He walked slowly, his eyes lingering on every piece: the shelves of cherry, the racks of tools, the student project table covered in pencil marks and eraser dust. He stopped at the wall where my personal sign hung. He didn't touch it, just read it quietly. "You named it well," he said. "Dovetail. It's about fit." I replied, "About 2 pieces coming together so cleanly they hold forever, even under strain." He gave a dry chuckle. "That explains why I never figured it out." I watched him run his hand along the edge of a finished bench. He tapped the corner. "You mitered this by hand?" "Of course." He nodded. "You always were the most precise." There was a long pause. I didn't feel it. Finally. He looked at me. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mara. I wouldn't ask for it. I just wanted to see what you made. And I wanted to tell you, in person, that I was wrong. About all of it. About who you were. About what mattered." I studied him. "Why now?" He hesitated. "Because last month, I watched a young man present a line of chairs at a design expo, and not one of them held together properly. One of your stepbrother's latest ideas. The chairs looked great, but they collapsed when anyone sat down." I smiled faintly. "That tracks." And it hit me. He continued. "I spent so many years focused on how something looked. I forgot about what it needed to last." We stood in the silence of that truth. Then he asked something I didn't expect. "Will you show me?" "Not the finished work. The process. How you start." I took him to the back, where Ava and Theo were fitting drawer runners into a walnut cabinet. He stood beside them quietly, not interrupting, not taking up space. When I handed him a piece of rough oak and a planer, he didn't hesitate. He took the tool, ran it once, felt the weight, then tried again. Slower. I watched his shoulders soften. I watched the father I once knew return, not completely, not perfectly, but enough. For 30 minutes, we worked in parallel silence. Then he stood, wiped his hands, and said, "Thank you for not turning me away." I didn't say anything, just nodded. As he left, he paused at the door. "Your mother would be proud. She always was." That night, after the shop emptied and the lights dimmed, I sat on the floor and ran my fingers along the compass Ray had given me. The needle still pointed north. Only this time, I wasn't following it to find my place. I was the one setting direction now. Later, Ava brought out a new sketch, her first solo design, a reading chair with curved armrests and a secret drawer in the side. "What should I call it?" she asked. I looked at the sketch. It was rough, but it had soul. "Call it The Return," I said. She blinked. "Why?" "Because everything worth making brings something back." She smiled and jotted the name in the corner, and I thought, maybe this is what legacy really is: not control, not inheritance, but return. The quiet rejoining of what was split. The acknowledgement that something was lost, and now found. I went to bed that night with sawdust in my hair and peace in my chest. Not because everything had healed, but because I had stopped asking for permission to exist, and started building without apology. The day the State Historical Society called, I nearly ignored the voicemail. I'd been in the middle of helping Celeste clamp a warped beechwood panel and hadn't heard my phone buzz until late afternoon. The message was brief, formal. We're curating an exhibit on the evolution of women in American craftsmanship and would like to include your story and work, if you're open to it. I played it twice, then set the phone down slowly. They'd found me. Not through Jennings and Sons, not through a family name, through Dovetail. Through what I'd made with bare hands and quiet tenacity. In the shadow of being erased. I called them back the next morning. Heart steady, voice clear. We spoke for 30 minutes. They asked questions about the early days, the shop, the students. Then came the big one. Would you be willing to loan any original pieces or design materials from the Jennings years? Something signed. Something that proves what's not in the paperwork. I paused. I knew exactly where those pieces were. In the old leather-bound sketchbook I'd kept tucked behind my filing cabinet. Spine cracked. Pages dog-eared with time. The original logo sketch. My first drawer joint blueprint. A letter from Mom where she described the finish of my first completed cabinet as like honey catching fire. I retrieved the book that evening, sat with it at the workbench, and I made a decision. I packed it into a box along with the compass, one of my early chisels, and a photograph of the shop's opening day, the full version, not the one they'd cropped. The version where I stood beside my father. Both of us grinning like we had no idea what silence would one day grow between us. I included a note for the curators. History isn't what's told. It's what's left behind and still holds weight. When the exhibit opened 3 months later, they invited me to speak. I stood in a room filled with faces I didn't know. Artists, historians, visitors with coffee cups and quiet reverence. On one wall, a timeline of women erased from their legacies. On another, a display case with my compass, my chisel, and my sketchbook laid open to the page with the 4 silhouettes. Someone had mounted a small placard beside it, the one they tried to leave out until she registered the name. Reclaim the tools, and built a future that made room for everyone. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked around the room and saw Ava standing near the back, holding a notebook and beaming. Theo was beside her, quieter but proud. Celeste had brought her box, held delicately in gloved hands like it was fine china. My people, the ones who came after, the ones who saw. I walked to the mic and told my story. Not for vengeance, not to retread the hurt, but so someone out there, some daughter, some sister, some person made small would know you don't disappear just because they stop saying your name. Afterward, a young woman approached me, probably in her mid-20s, dressed in paint-smeared overalls, holding her phone like it was a lifeline. You said you were pushed out, she said softly, that they took your name off everything, that they rewrote it. I nodded. She looked down, then back up. My brother just rebranded our studio, took my initials off the art, told me it's just easier for clients if it looks like it's him alone. I felt something ache inside me, a deep, quiet echo of a bruise I still carried. I'm scared if I walk away. I won't have anything, she said. I looked her in the eye. Then build it. From scratch if you have to. From a garage. From a back room. From the hours they don't see. It will be slow, and it will hurt, but it will be yours. She swallowed hard, then nodded once. Thank you, she whispered. That night, I returned to the shop. The windows glowed with amber light. Ava was still inside, sanding the curved arms of her new design. She looked up when I entered. How was it, she asked. I hung my coat by the door and smiled. It was a beginning. The next few weeks moved quietly. No press frenzy, No social media storm. Just a few new inquiries, a thank you letter from the museum, and a surprise delivery of framed certificate from the registry office officially acknowledging the historical contribution of Mara Jennings, artisan and co-founder. 1997-2012. I put it in the office, next to the photo of Mom. Then, one crisp October morning, a package arrived. It was from George. No return address, just his name on a small card inside. I opened it carefully. Inside was a wooden nameplate, carved in walnut, smooth as silk. It read, Mara Jennings, Master Builder. I see it now. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it by the studio entrance, just beneath the dovetail sign, not to gloat, not to signal victory, but to mark the truth. For me, for the students, for anyone who walked through those doors carrying silence on their backs. That evening, I lit the old kerosene lamp Mom used to keep in the hallway. The smell of burnt wick and old oil filled the room. I stood in the center of the shop and let myself breathe. And for the first time since I'd been cut out, I felt complete, not perfect, not resolved, but whole. Because wholeness doesn't come from winning the war. It comes from still being here when they thought you'd leave. It comes from carving your name into something that lasts. It comes from saying, quietly but firmly, I was there. I made this. You will not forget me. Now, when students ask how Dovetail started, I tell them only this. I was taken off the family business logo, so I registered the trademark, and I built something no one could erase. They smile. They don't ask for more, because the rest is in the wood. The rest is in the way we build. The rest is in every hand that refuses to vanish.